I can see. Alrighty, friends. So let's move forward with our time together today. So we were talking about managing fear from uncertainty to resiliency. Okay. And today we're going to look at a couple things. This is why we're gathered here together. My purpose is to support creating more understanding about uncertainty and just our natural reactions to stress and why it's so difficult for us. We're going to build some more presence and the ability to work with mindset. And I'm hoping to provide some really practical tools that you can use to redirect your energy and attention strategically. We're going to try them out together today. And I hope you are ready to take those forward with you as soon as you log off of this call today. We will be using a piece of paper, something to just jot a couple notes down on for later in the webinar. So just letting you know that if you want to grab something or just have it in proximity for you for a little bit later on. All right. I'm going to divide this into 3 sections today. We're going to first talk about the modern challenge that we're all navigating a lot of stress in our lives, right? And why that is so hard on our systems. Then we're going to talk about that there is a solution. We can train our well-being. That's why we're here together today to talk about that. And we're going to do that by building a couple of in real-time resilience habits. So let's start with what's challenging for us. I like to call this the open secret because we're all aware of it, but no one's necessarily talking about it or giving it as much credence as perhaps we should. So we together collectively are navigating a stress epidemic. Okay. Yet when we look out in the world, our brain likes to tell us everybody else has it together, right? They have a certain title. They're doing amazing with their 3 kids. How did they make that additional dish at the potluck, right? Everybody else has it together, but inside we're sort of slowly just screaming and feeling like we're burning, right? When the truth is we're on this sort of stress bus together. Okay. So this is an us experience, right? So I want to just name that right off to say we need to normalize this because if we don't, it becomes more isolating and often leads to burnout rather than to connection and thriving. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our biology to start with in terms of how we're navigating stress or not navigating it. I love this, this image. We're running complex software on a prehistoric hard drive, meaning our biology just hasn't evolutionary caught up yet to the demands, particularly in the tech area of our life and societal norms. Okay, so specifically, I want to look at uncertainty, right? Because that's in the title of this presentation today, Navigating Uncertainty, and why uncertainty is so difficult for us as humans. We're hardwired to hate uncertainty. Our brains know that ultimately things are not certain, and that we can't control everything. Yet we try, and we often make decisions to avoid that uncertainty. And there's a really interesting experiment related to this that I would love to share with you today. So it's an experiment by Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia. In this experiment, he brought people and his team brought people into a waiting room. He had them sit there and wait for 15 minutes to go into what they thought was the experiment. In this waiting room, there was no stimulus there. Okay. There was a chair, there was a table. They weren't allowed to have their phones, magazines. There's no music. It was just quiet and then just sitting there. There's only one thing available to them, though, which was a device that if they touched it, they could shock themselves. Okay. I'm always stunned how these things pass IRBs, but so it did. So here are these people one at a time sitting there, and they were so curious what they would do if they were just left to their own devices with no stimulation for 15 minutes. Would they shock themselves? So obviously this was the experiment, right? So one at a time, you had people go in there and see what happens when we're just left with our thoughts and without distraction and stimulation. So our first question for the group today, in how they set this up, they set it up on a gender binary so that people identifying as male and female. So I'm curious for our friends here today, who do you think shock themselves more? The people that identified as men or women? Let's just take a guess in the chat for me here. Who do you think shock themselves more in 15 minutes of sitting there? Oh, it's pretty much unanimous. Men, oh, poor men. Okay, so yes, that is accurate. The men were the ones that shock themselves more. Okay, so knowing that, what percentage of women do you think shock themselves? Let's take a guess. What percentage of women do you think shock themselves at least one time in this 15-minute time period of just sitting with their thoughts? Got a couple of guesses. Oh, you're all averaging really nicely on the data point. Yeah, about 25% of women shock themselves at least one time in 15 minutes. Okay, now we already agree that men shock themselves more. So let's take a guess there. What do you think? What percentage of men shock themselves at least one time? We know it's going to be over. Yes, they did know that they were going to get shocked. Yep, they were told that if they touched this device, they would get shocked. So yeah, what percentage? 100%, 75, 60. Maybe somebody's read this study out there. So yeah, 67% of men ended up shocking themselves at least one time in 15-minute time period. And so about 2/3. And I have to mention, there was one gentleman, this is definitely an outlier, but I just think it's so fascinating that actually shocked himself 190 times within a 15-minute time period. Okay, 190 times. That's impressive to say the least. And yeah, an outlier, but still. So, thinking about this, they came to a couple conclusions, and I'm going to come to one connected to what we're discussing here, which is that uncertainty is more stressful than predictable negative consequences. So let's get under that a little bit. Okay. What this is saying is that we would rather choose something that is painful. In this case, it was physical pain, but we know that our brains don't sort physical, emotional, psychological pain super well. So we could just sort of say pain, right? Rather choose something that we know is going to be painful because it's predictable than just be with the not knowing and not knowing what's coming, being with the uncertainty. That's how much our brains dislike uncertainty. Okay, it's more stressful to us than choosing something we know is going to have a negative impact. So just think about that for yourself in your own life. Where are we overbooking ourselves and being super busy and trying to avoid, different things, and just that space to just be. We add stress into our lives to avoid these uncertainty or not knowing, right? And if we take that to deeper effect to look at, some of our folks that are struggling with addictions and other things, where are we choosing things that we know have a negative impact just because it has a known factor to it, right? So that's part of our brain setup. I also want to take a little bit more time to describe these 3 key biological challenges that we have that we're just preconditioned to as humans, okay, in terms of stress and fear. So the first one is vigilance and anxiety. We're preconditioned to go into the sympathetic nervous system response of fight, flight, wow, fight, flee, or freeze, or faint. So I'm guessing most people have heard of fight or flight. Is that accurate in the chat? Most people, have some awareness of that fight or flight response. Great. Okay, perfect. All right. I'm going to draw it out just a little bit because I think this is so crucial to understanding how we just are in our day sometimes and what's happening. So, our nervous system is set up really well to deal with real or perceived acute life stress. Okay, so let's imagine overuse scenario, but a lion jumping out into the room. Okay, if a lion jumped into each of our rooms right now, which would be impressive. Obviously, a lion jump out. Our bodies are going to have very quick similar response. Okay, adrenaline and cortisol is going to go up immediately, right? It's doing that to create a cascade of reaction in our body to push blood and nourishment to our extremities so that we can survive this moment, so we can fight or run away, ideally, right? So to do that, our blood pressure is going to go up, our heart rate increases, our insulin levels change, our digestion ability lowers, our immunity lowers, our reproductive capacity lowers. We don't need to digest that sandwich right now. We just need to survive the next 10 seconds. Then we can digest the sandwich, right? So all of this happens pretty much instantaneously. So fortunately, most of us are not in our lifetime very often in that level of actual life threat, maybe a few times, right? Unfortunately, what we are in day after day is getting pinged 100 times and our client dropping an appointment on our calendar and our child's school calling and say they grew up and we need to go pick them up, right? And our nervous system doesn't know the difference. It hasn't adapted yet. So our nervous system is going lion, 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 right? So we're in this chronic feeling and experience in our bodies of the sympathetic arousal. And I am not a medical professional, but I will say in the many people I'm fortunate to work with, I hear more and more, right, that I have higher blood pressure, I'm recommended to start medication, or I'm pre-diabetic, or I'm having these digestive issues and IBS or autoimmune conditions or fertility issues, right? So obviously there's a lot of reasons and variables for things, but part of our system being under this threat response all the time certainly isn't helping us out, okay? And that's on a physical level. I want to also name on a mental emotional level when we go into this fight or flight sympathetic response. On brain scans, we can see the blood supply go from our more frontal part of our brain to this limbic part of our brain, which is the fear-based part, the survival-based part of our brain, which makes sense in this type of situation. However, what our frontal part of our brain is really good for is most things we do in everyday life, right? And that we want to have access to. So being solution focused, creative, innovative, being able to be in communication and be relational, right? Ideate on things. All of that is in the front part of our brain. So when we're in this state, we do not have access. We do not have that capacity available to us. So just keep that in mind for yourself as well as people on your teams or even in your families. If we're starting to go into this reactive place, we're not going to be able to think and solve through things or learn very well when we're in that state. So it has a lot of implications. All right. Second part is we have a negativity bias. Does anybody notice this, that we're more likely to look for and remember things that are bad that happened than those that are good, right? Again, this has a survival reason to it. So we'll use our lion example again in a different way. So if we were imagine that we have an ancestor who's like walking down a path and they see the brown hump in the distance, right? And they look at it and they go, oh my gosh, I think that might be a lion. And they run away. And then they come back a little later and they get a little closer and they realize it's a rock. They're like, oh, well, that was silly. It's just a rock. Okay. And they go about their day, right? They survive that situation. Say we have another ancestor, different path, walking along, see the brown hump in the distance. And they think, oh, probably a rock. Oh, what a beautiful day. It's starting to almost feel like fall a little bit. It's so nice. And they get closer and it turns out to be a lion. Okay, that ancestor did not survive. So we are here today in a lineage of humans that looked for threat, scanned for threat, remembered where threatening things were for survival. That's how we got here. So guess what we are doing? The same thing. We walk into a meeting and we're going, okay, who's threatening? What's the negative things? Like our brain just naturally goes there. And we also hyper index to remembering these sort of things. Just think about, last vacation you went on, or you're more likely to come back and start with, oh my gosh, they lost my luggage and I had to wait 4 hours and or we had this beautiful sunset dinner one of the nights, right? We're going to go with the luggage. So again, if we're not paying attention, if we're just on autopilot, our biology is going to preset us to be pretty negative focused. Okay. And then lastly, we're running these mental simulations or kind of movies all the time that go something like, well, last time this happened, don't want that to happen again. So let me think about the 100 different ways that this could go this time, future focus. We're running all these like maybe this, maybe this, maybe this. And guess what? Most of them are negative and they kick up this fight or flight response. Okay, so again, this is just how we're hardwired to survive. And it's though not as useful as we might hope in our daily life right now. So that's maybe a little depressing way to start, but I really want to set up the foundation for why uncertainty and stress are things that we're navigating together and haven't sort of caught up fully to on our own without being conscious and aware and doing some training for well-being, which we can do, which is why we're gathered here today. And the reason for that is neuroplasticity, which means that our brain through our whole life continues to change and grow. And where we put emphasis, the things that we focus on, that's the part of our brain that grows. Just like, when we're doing bicep curls at the gym, if we do those bicep curls, our bicep grows. With our brain, where we focus on gets lit up more, and then we see those things more, right? So we can use that to our benefit to diminish the thought patterns and the behaviors that we don't want as much and increase the ones that are going to help us out more. So well-being is a skill that can be trained by cultivating our attention in our daily lives. So there are multiple things we could do to care for ourselves and our well-being. Take that PTO time, get the massage on the weekend, eat healthy, all those. Please do all those things, do them all. And I'm so interested also, like, what can we do in real time right now while we're here together, while we're with the client, while you're in line at Starbucks, while you're with your kids, right? Like, what are these micro habits that we can do in real time? I think that's particularly interesting. So this is the direction we're going to go together now for our remaining time. Okay. So the first skill that I want to share with you today is the one of presence. So going back to those mental simulations, right? We live in a highly distracted world externally, but even if we're just with ourselves internally, we tend to be looking in the past, wishing, oh, I wish I would have done that different. So let me, look forward and again, run all those simulations. We're like ping-ponging over the present moment. We need tools to help us be right here and right now, because this is where life is lived, right? We want to absolutely inform ourselves by learnings from the past. And we want to look forward with some structure, but also flexibility, right? But we need to anchor in here and now, because this is where action happens. This is where our life is, right? And that's really challenging. It's a moment to moment thing. So we need some, hacks, some tools to help bring us back, because we're going to get distracted. So how do we come back? Our breath and our body are always in the present moment. Our mind can be time traveling all over the place, right? But we can use our breath and our body as quick means to bring ourselves back. And then we can be here and then say, okay, now what do I choose to do? Right? There are many different breathing hacks, body-based things that, oh my gosh, I wish I could share them all with you. But I've chosen one today called the 4x4 breath. And the reason that we're going to try this out together is because it's easy to remember. You just have to remember the number 4. And it's a 4-count inhale and a 4-count exhale that we do 4 times. Okay, that's all there is to this. Remember from what I was sharing before, when we go to fight or flight, all this stuff happens in our body, our brain. We can't just say, okay, digestion, start up again, blood pressure lower, right? And have that happen. But what we can do is change our breathing, which then changes all those other things within a very short amount of time, right? So that's why this is so important. Okay, if we shift our breathing, we can shift everything else along with it and come back into a more calm, present state. Okay, so we're going to do this together. I'm going to talk us through it. The first thing I'd like you to do, though, is to just notice, just do a quick little check-in with yourself, because I love data, right? We want some data for ourselves here. On a scale of, let's say, 1 to 5, where are you at in terms of sort of present stress right now? Okay, so let's say 1 is calm, centered here, right? Really present. And 5 is overwhelmed, distracted, what's coming after this? Wait, did she just ask us a question? Like, right? Feeling kind of distracted, intense, high intensity, right? So 1 to 5, just do a little check-in on your own barometer right now. Where are you at? If you would like to put that in chat, you're welcome to. You don't need to. Just take a moment to sort of 1 to 5 check in. Okay. All right. And now we're going to try out a little experiment here with our breathing. Okay. So I invite you to place a hand on your belly. And thanks for those that are putting their guess in the chat. That's helpful to know. So take one hand, doesn't matter which one, on the belly, depending your environment, if this feels okay for you. And if you'd like, you can also place the hand higher on your chest somewhere, just an invitation. Everything's an invitation. The reason I like to do this myself is because when we're in more of that negative stress place, running all those movies, we tend to be breathing high and shallow and fast. So we want to do the opposite to that to have the maximum effect. So we want to breathe low and slow. So if we put a hand on our belly, it can remind us to imagine that we're breathing from there. It's called diaphragmatic breathing rather than up high here on our chest, okay? And you can keep your eyes open or you can lower them. For this, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's easier to lower or close them, less distraction, but we're also out in the world, right, doing things. So I want you to be able to know that you can do this at any time too. So you can also try it with your eyes open or a combination. All right. So I'm going to talk us through this again, 4 count inhale, 4 count exhale 4 times, right? So go ahead and exhale out. And then you're going to start to inhale through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale out. 2, 3, 4. And again, inhale from your belly. 2, 3, 4, and exhale out. 2, 3, 4. Again, inhale. 2, 3, 4, and exhale out. 2, 3, 4. Last time, in from the belly. 2, 3, 4, and exhale out. 2, 3, 4, and just return to your natural breath. Okay. Feel it kind of go a little bit. Let's do our check-in again. Scale of 1 to 5 now for yourself. Again, 1 more here, centered, grounded. Or 2, 5, right? 5, scattered, distracted, overwhelmed, very sort of stressed. Okay, just check in now where you feel like you're at. About a minute worth. Okay, so know that that is something that we can do at any time. And I'm curious if, folks would like that are present here together, if that felt like it made a little difference. Feel free to put something in the chat if you would like, if the number adjusted a little bit or you had any notice. Wow, okay, that's a big jump from 4 to about 1.5. Yeah, so sometimes it's a little bit, sometimes it's more, but that's the power of shifting our breath, right? And a lot of research, a lot of people saying it helped. Okay, great. So, each of these is backed by multiple studies, but when we're working with our attention in this way, it's easier for us to focus, right? Because we have blood supply in the front of our brain. We can actually focus on things again. We have less stress and anxiety, which we just experienced, right? It brings down that arousal of our nervous system response and starts to calm things. We have less mind wandering. Mind wandering is associated with unhappiness. So that's a great thing. We can navigate pain more, physical or emotional. It puts it a little bit more background. We're happier and we have better immunity because remember, when we're in that fight or flight place, that shuts down our immunity. So who doesn't want better immunity? Okay, so a lot of positives there. This is concisely what this practice is to remember for going forward. We want to notice when we're feeling any of those things I was talking about with the lion: stress, distracting, negative, overwhelmed, future focus, any of that. So just a little red flag. We don't have to beat ourselves up about it. We just say, oh, I got a lot going on right now. Let me take a breath. Slow, deep breath. If we have a little space and time, 4x4 breathing. But ultimately, if we can, I'll take one breath. And I don't make absolute statements very often, but I will say, I genuinely believe that taking a breath can change everything that comes after that. And the reason for that is because this is the difference between reacting and responding. When things are going fast and we're reacting and we're overwhelmed and we're stressed and we don't know, we're feeling that uncertainty, right? We're reacting. So taking that breath helps bring all of our blood supply, competence, and capacity back on board, brings us back to where our feet are actually in the moment. And then we can say, okay, how do I want to respond here? What do I choose? Okay. Game changer. This is the one thing you take away from this, is that I can take a breath through my day. Please do that. You're not going to do this too often. So, before every call, this is my practice before a Zoom call or a Teams call, before I hit go, take a breath. It's going to set it up completely differently for yourself. Okay. All right. We have one more piece I want to share with you today. And this is another skill set on working directly with your mindset called inquiry or self-inquiry. Okay. We want to first calm our body and our breath and come back to the present moment. We cannot do more cognitive skills or use these tools if we don't have blood supply in our brain to do them. So first, take a couple of breaths, do some sort of physical movement if you would like something to come back to the present moment. Then we can say, okay, what are my thoughts doing here? Okay. Work with our mindset, work with our perspective. So when we just blanketly believe our stressful thoughts, we believe every thought in our brain is true and run with it, we get more of a fixed mindset, meaning I'm stuck, I feel more of a victim of the situation, I can't change, others can't change, and we tend to be more reactive. However, if we start to question our thoughts and say, wait a minute, is that actually true? Or is there another way I could be looking at this right now? That leads more to growth mindset and the ability to respond. So we want that. Okay, so this is a tool to do this. There's a lot of benefits from questioning or interrupting just our automatic thought patterns. We have enhanced mood, we're less stressed and anxious, we sleep better, and surprise, surprise, we have less negative thinking, because what we're saying is, instead of just believing all that negativity bias, negative thoughts that are coming up, we're gonna slow down and pivot to something that's more useful or resourceful for us. Okay. I'm going to give a little bit of analogy involving skiing to set this up. I'm from Colorado originally, so I feel kind of obligated to talk about skiing at some point here. So if you do not ski, you can also think about riding a bike or driving a car. Okay, similar idea, but I'll speak about this via skiing. We're going to imagine we're at the top of the slope. We're starting to go down the hill. And we start to notice there's a bunch of trees over here. And we look over at the trees and we think, I don't want to go to the trees. I definitely don't want to go to the trees. Last time I went to the trees, it was total yard sale. I lost my poles, my hat, whatever happened to that hat. Oh, that's my feet were cold and my hands were, it was terrible. And I don't want to go to the trees. I don't want to go to the trees. And we're looking at the trees. Somebody take a guess where we're going in that scenario. Somebody put in the chat for me. We're like, I don't want to go to the trees. Where are we headed? Yeah, thank you. We are absolutely going to the trees. Okay. And because all of our attention is at the trees. So our brain doesn't recognize the not trees. It's just going trees, right? And there we go. Exactly. So let's try this run down the slope again. This time we're going to go down. We're going down and we notice, yeah, the trees are there. Of course, they're still there, right? Okay, I don't want to go to the trees. I'm going to put my focus about 10 feet in front of the end of my skis. Let's see what the angle of the sun is doing, the terrain, right? Going down, down. Trees go by, going down this. Okay. So key thing, the trees did not just disappear. This is not magical thinking. We're not just putting unicorns on stuff and saying like, it's going to be great. That does not work. That is not what we're talking about here. We're saying everything is in the landscape, the hard things, the trees, the challenging things, the negative things, they're here. And all this is in the landscape too. So what do I choose? That is the power. That is the control that we have, is our perspective and our mindset. Where we put our attention becomes our experience. So we get to decide if we want a tree experience or we want a slope experience. Okay, we get to choose from the landscape. So we're going to do that via this tool called inquiry. And I'm going to talk us through this. This is where we're going to use our little piece of paper, okay, and jot a couple things down for ourselves as we go. It'll just help track. Okay. So I want you to choose something that's real and true for you, that's not resolved, that is happening right now, or it could be something you're anticipating. Could be a person or a situation, a challenging, client, or feeling like maybe there's certain due dates and you don't have the staff to complete things on, or feeling misunderstood by something that's triggering, reactive, or under your skin. It could be reoccurring, it could be upcoming, right? And something that it's like in the 5 to 7 range in terms of challenge for you. Okay, so just picking something that you're going to just use with yourself as an example of this so we can give it a try. Okay. So just want you to notice like the negative thoughts that you have about this person's situation to begin with, and be honest with yourself. Are you looking at this right now more as a problem or an opportunity? Most likely it feels like a problem. You're like, gosh, if this person in a situation just could be gone, that would be awesome. Right? Or maybe it's problem opportunity mix. Okay. But we want to start with the noticing of what the situation is first, with being honest with ourselves and just honoring how we feel for a minute. So notice too, if you have an emotion connected with it, when you think about this person, their name popping up in your email box or whatever, right? Is it frustration, disappointment, anxiousness? So just jot down if you have emotion connected with it as well, because we want to really start with what's true and what we feel and what's hard. We don't want to stay there, however, but we want to give a nod to it first. Then we want to shift it, right? So we're going to shift it by getting really curious if there's another way that we could look at this situation. Is there another interpretation, another perspective we could take that could help us out a little bit more? And we're going to do that by asking ourselves some questions. Questions are like mental yoga. It helps stretch our brain. Okay. So we're going to run through these questions, just going to give a moment for each of them. I'll read them out loud. And I want you to just think first thought, best thought. So the first thing that comes to mind, this is a total brainstorm. There's no right or wrong answer to this. I want you to just jot down on your piece of paper whatever first comes to mind for yourself here. Okay. And some of these are going to resonate more or less with you depending on who you are, and that's okay. Okay. So let's start with the first one. So knowing that this is the situation that is challenging for you, this person, this whatever you're going through, that's hard. What also is an opportunity or benefit for you of this situation? Okay, so just jotting down something for yourself, some kind of opportunity or benefit. If you have to be in this situation, what might be coming from it potentially? Okay, so number 2. This is kind of a classic one. If you had a person that's close to you, so a friend, a colleague, someone else that was experiencing the same thing, they were telling you about it, how would you advise them to deal with it? Just right now, just think about one piece of information, one piece of advice that you would give them to keep in mind if this were your friend or colleague or even child. Okay, number 3. Think of someone who inspires you or who you really admire. It might be a real person that you know, a teacher, a family member, a friend, a mentor, or it could be somebody famous or hypothetical, it could be Wonder Woman, I don't know. But someone you admire or inspired by how they navigate life, okay? And imagine them in front of you for a moment. Just see, what's a word of wisdom that they would give you about how to handle this interaction? They were in front of you right now, what's one thing that they would tell you? A word of wisdom. Okay, number 4. Will you imagine yourself purposely now going in the future, 10 years from now in the future? Will you even be upset about this anymore? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. If not, want your 10 years from now self to look back, future you, say to current you, to put this in perspective. What would the future version of you 10 years from now want current you to know to help put this in perspective? And number 5, moving forward, how would the best possible version of you want to respond? So this is not an excuse for you to beat yourself up and say, if I was better, I would be able to do. That is not what we're saying here. Okay. We're saying the person that you aspire to be, the colleague, the leader, the manager, the parent, whatever your situation is that you're choosing to work with here, that best version of you, how would they want to move forward? What's one thing they would keep in mind for themselves to respond? Okay. And I am aware of the time, so I know if some folks need to transition, I absolutely understand that. We got slightly later start due to a couple of technical things, so I'm going to move forward for just a couple more minutes. But again, understanding if you need to transition. So we use these different questions to check in with our perspective, and now we want to choose one. We want to choose a new way of looking at this that we just brainstormed that's going to be more resourceful, going to be more resilient for us. I want you to look back at the things that you wrote down 1 through 5 here on your piece of paper and circle the one that has the most juice, that feels the most impactful for you. And maybe it's a combination. What here, if you chose to put that perspective on, would be more powerful and empowering for you as a stance? Okay. And then I want you to imagine encountering this person or this situation again and coming at it from that perspective, that inner location. And just imagine what that might offer as far as more possibility for you, more presence, groundedness, and resource. Okay. And that's what we want to choose. And that's what we want to commit to. And that's what we want to keep coming back to and practice over and over. Okay. So what does this look like on a daily basis? I want you to just notice, back to this again, which one of these questions had the most juice for you? Okay, and it's going to be different for each one of us. So for those of us still with us today, if anybody wants to drop it, you don't have to write what it is, but just put 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in the chat. I'd be curious to know, because this is very personal and it's different for each person. I know for me personally, that like best version of myself one comes to mind. Yeah, so people have different ones. This is great. This is one we're going to try this out. So you're welcome to talk through all of these, but if there's one that's really packing the powerful punch for you, I could call that your like magic question as you go forward. Okay, so on a daily basis, notice when, again, that sense of negativity or challenge or stress comes up and what it's connected to and the negative thinking pattern. You can say for a moment, wait a minute, let me use my question here. What's an opportunity for me in this situation, or whichever it was for you? and then take a moment, see what that awareness is, and then move forward with that in real time. Another piece, I love getting on the front of things. So I'd so much rather walk into a meeting already with a perspective that's going to help me out, right? So knowing that you're going into that meeting, or knowing you see that person's name on your email before you even go into that, take a breath, choose a perspective, and move forward. So your experience is what you agree to attend to. All right. So that is our concluding piece. Thank you so much for joining us today. Right. Want to remind you that we have a couple more well-being seminars coming up, like this one in September with Martha. About 20 minutes quick reset in your day. October, our CEO David's going to be talking about scaling well-being through healthy leadership. And then in December, we're going to talk about managing across generations, really popular topic right now with Stephanie, our director of workplace well-being, and you'll get a little bit more of me then as well. So thank you so much for being here, for your time today. Continue to check us out on LinkedIn and YouTube channel. And if you have any interest in further questions or anything, please know you can email me at Zina at Third Horizon Strategies. And thank you all. Thank you for your messages in the chat and for participating so wholeheartedly today. I hope you are well and keep breathing and working with your mindset to support yourself. Okay, have a great rest of your day and week, everyone. Thank you.